Welcome to the Clean Call. This is the weekly meeting of the Climate Literacy Network. And this group meets weekly. I know that there's some folks that are just joining us today because of what our presentation is about. So welcome to this weekly call. And for those of you that are here often, welcome back. We have some speakers, some fantastic group of young women joining us from Poland, Katowice, Poland, and we'll be hearing from them in just a little bit. But as we usually do, I'm going to open up just introduce myself. My name's Kristen Poppleton. I'm facilitating here today, and I am Director of Programs with an organization called Climate Generation, which I'll share with you just a tiny bit about before our young women begin to present. But before that, I just want to open it up to any announcements that people might have that they want to share with the community.
Well, for those of you who can make it to AGU, the workshop on Thursday is setting up to be quite wonderful. As we roll out of that, we'll report back to the network as we advance this community's work. So those of you who can join us from 1 to 4 on Thursday, that would be wonderful.
That was Frank Neopold, for those of you that don't know.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, moving too fast. Frank Neopold, NOAA Climate Program Office.
Awesome.
Hi there, this is Frank Granshaw, the other Frank. I just wanted to give an audio hi to Josie and Craig. Glad to see you guys are still around there.
Because Frank, are you back? Frank was just in Poland as well. Are you still there?
Yeah. Oh, no. We came back on Saturday. We're just there for the first week.
Awesome. Any other announcements that people might have? Great. All right, I did my teacher wait time. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started then, and I wanted to just introduce for you all, give you a little bit of a context. Some of you I know have joined these webinars for the last couple of years. It's been a really fun thing. The clean community, I think, has been able to engage in is learning about climate change from the global solutions level and how we're tackling this issue at a global level. There's been people from this community attending the COPs for a number of years, and every year we've had the opportunity to hear from different groups of folks that are there. So we have been, as an organization, hosting delegations to attend these meetings for a number of years. And our organization, based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, our entire mission is to empower individuals in their communities to engage in solutions to climate change. And we see this opportunity as a great learning opportunity, but also way to elevate the voices of different groups at the international level. We work with youth, we work with educators, we work with the public, we work with influentials, and we really think about how we can engage these folks by building their climate literacy, by building their ability to advocate for climate solutions, and by elevating their leadership out at the public level in a various ways. And one of them being the opportunity to support delegations to attend these really important global discussions around climate change. And we started doing this at COP24 in Copenhagen by bringing a delegation of Midwest youth. We then, in COP, brought a delegation of 10 teachers to COP21 and supported some other folks between there. Most recently, last year, we sent a multi-sector delegation to COP23, recognizing that the solutions were really happening more at a local level with the lack of federal engagement, and that those solutions weren't just happening from a policy level; they were coming out of the legal realm, out of the education, out of philanthropy, out of business. And so we had representatives from all of these different sectors that were sharing their experiences at COP, and also sharing the important place that Minnesota, as a member of the U.S. Climate Alliance, and Minnesota is still in, could play at the international level on climate action. This year, when we look at what is this COP, I wanted to make sure for those of you that are like, what the heck are we talking about? What is COP about? To just kind of get some grounding in vocabulary. COPs are annual conferences that occur to assess progress and make decisions on global climate action. They come out of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is the 24th annual of these conferences. The Paris Agreement is one of the outcomes from these conferences that came out of COP21. And this is really the first framework that was created that for setting, assessing, and ratcheting up greenhouse gas reduction goals. This year, we have sent, as an organization, a delegation of business to COP24. And this was deliberately chosen because of the really important role that we see the private sector playing as leaders, and through their commitments to upholding the Paris Agreement despite the lack of commitments at the international level. The US has indicated that they will pull out of the Paris Agreement, but this actually couldn't happen until 2020 if they did do that. And so this COP, where COP21 was really where we created this framework through the agreement of the things we wanted to do, this is what they're calling Paris 2.0. This is where we're putting together the rule book, the playbook. How do you actually put these things into play and actually operationalize them? So that's the kind of work that's happening right now in Poland. Our delegation, as I mentioned, is all business. We have Alexis from Best Buy Corporation, Alyssa from Target Corporation, Jesse Turk from an architecture firm here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Michelle Courtwright, who is a restaurant owner of a plant-based restaurant in Minneapolis. And they are also doing webinars, and they're blogging daily. And if you're interested in following them, you can do that at our web address there. But today, we also, one of the really important partnerships that we have had as an organization over the years is with the School of Environmental Studies. It's a public high school in Apple Valley, Minnesota. And we were also able, because of the number of spots we were given as an accredited observer at the COPs this year, to provide 2 passes to 2 lovely young women from the School of Environmental Studies. And so they are part of a larger delegation, and that they'll be sharing more about that, from the school that is headed up by Craig Johnson, one of our longtime partners, and Brad Johnson, another teacher from the School of Environmental Studies. And so with that, I want to pass the microphone over to them straight from Poland. And Katie, if you're able to take away my rights and give presenter rights to them, that would be awesome.
I am on it. Here we go. All right, it's all you guys.
That sounded just like Margaret.
Okay. Yeah. Hi.
Gotta figure this all out.
Right, just kind of figure out the mechanics here.
Okay. All right. My name is Josie. My name is McKenna. And I'm Michaela. And we're seniors from the High School of Environmental Studies. It's in Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is about 20 minutes south of the Twin Cities. And it really just promotes environmental initiatives for youth. Yep, so right now we're in Krakow, which is where we're staying. And as she mentioned, we are just about an hour away from Katowice, which is where the COP24 is going on. And we spent the last week going going there every day and just scoping things out and learning a lot about everything that she was talking about and getting to see it firsthand. So today in this webinar, we will specifically be talking about what it's like to be a youth at this conference, which is an international, very like high-end formal conference. And within that, we'll be talking about 3 major themes: interaction, accessibility, and ideas.
Right, just to give you guys a little insight of who we are and why we're so passionate about this issue, we're just gonna kind of briefly tell you guys about our climate change stories. So to kind of start us off, I love agates. I've always loved rocks. You know, each year I go up to northern Minnesota to hunt for these agates and rocks. And each year I'm like surrounded in the forest and everything. And I've been seeing the adverse effects of climate change on these forests. So yeah.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in nonfiction books. Even growing up, fiction books weren't really my thing. And I was also always interested in fashion. So one time I read a book about fast fashion, nonfiction of course, and reading about the environmental effects really got me interested in other human-caused impacts on the environment. And ever since, I've been looking into a huge variety of human impacts and what we can do to limit those impacts. Yeah, and I kind of grew up in a more rural area, so I always had nature outside my back door, so I was able to see the changes in climate, how that affects the more environment and ecosystems up close and up personal. Along with that, I come from a family that loves road trips, so we've gone to almost all the national parks in the US, and we've learned a lot through climate change and ecosystems and how all that works. So that's really given me kind of like this lifelong passion for just learning about how the environment works and human impacts, so especially climate change, because it's such a big issue. Yeah, and I'm just going to return real quickly to those 3 main ideas. We had interaction, ideas, and accessibility. And of those, interaction and ideas can comfortably be addressed through these 3 questions. It is, what do we bring to COP? What do we take out of COP? And how do we apply to our community? And so let's start it off with, what do we bring to COP?
Right. You know, what I saw, and just to speak in general terms, the creativity that young people have is invaluable in the search for climate solutions, you know, and innovative solutions to this climate change issue. And talking with Katie, a graduate student from BOEM, which is the Bureau of Ocean Energy and Management, and she is harnessing kinetic wave energy and translating that into electricity into something, this absolutely creative idea, you know, just like that, I think is definitely invaluable.
Yeah, and I guess like kind of going off of that, just like how valuable the youth voice is just as a generation, we have a completely different perspective as most people, considering that we have the greatest impact from climate change. We are going to be on this planet likely for the longest period of time. We are going to deal with these issues for the longest period of time. And because of this, we have a different energy that we bring to the table, a different sort of excitement, right, and a different perspective. Yeah. And just having this voice and this perspective is completely different than most generations, because we see this as an immediate and a prioritized issue.
Right. It's in such an intense atmosphere too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of building off that. Excuse me. I think like just being there as a youth, we kind of open up that like we kind of give these delegates an option or an opportunity to really like realize like these people are here. And they're like, it kind of like gives them an open discussion on what will be in the future, because right now all of their goals that start in 2020 only really last up until 2030, like not really up to like 2050, and then what? And that is something that we as youth are very, very impacted by and also very interested in. So we kind of like start that discussion with them, and we also kind of give them this opportunity of like thinking about like they're kind of becoming like, if you've ever heard like standing on the shoulders of giants, we're kind of going to be hopefully those people who will be doing that, and that kind of like gives them that realization of like, hey, like, you know, you need to build something, and like, you know, we're going to help you build something so future generations, including ours, including those who come next, we can just keep building back on what was already laid down, especially like COP24, COP20.
Yeah. And then like even just like on an individual sense, we all have different things to bring to the table. Like there is that youth voice, but we all have these completely different ideas. Like personally, I have a big background in Minnesotan issues because I've been a longtime volunteer for the group MN350. So I have a lot of experience with pipelines and Lake Superior and the Northern Territories and how that affects the Native and Indigenous people from northwestern Minnesota. Like this was even a perspective that like, other students wanted to hear and other participants from COP wanted to hear. Like I was interviewed by another student from Indiana University. So I just feel like we all have these different things that we have to contribute to this, and just different ideas because of our youth backgrounds.
Right. Yeah. I have an extensive knowledge of sustainable living. I was fortunate enough for the past 2 summers to be working on a biodynamic farm in Vermont. And there I really saw in real time how people can interact with the environment in a sustainable way, that it's completely feasible way of living.
Yeah. Me, I'm very much an introvert, but that doesn't mean like I don't interact with people. Something that I personally bring to the table as a youth is that I'm able to just kind of listen to how others interact with each other, with people from maybe like from a non-governmental organization to all the way up to like the delegates who are negotiating these things, and being able to watch that, because that's just something I always have been able to do, just kind of into relationships that people like create with the discussions that they're creating. So it's kind of something that I've been able to bring to COP and just kind of like help people understand like what's really going on behind that. So yeah, any other
Honestly,
that
covers it for me.
Right.
All right. So yeah. So I think we'll move on to our second question, which is what do we take out of COP? Which is kind of very similar to our first question, but definitely more of like
an inverse. It's like what have we gained in the experience
yeah,
rather than the experience that we've brought.
Yeah.
And I feel like I honestly kind of want to do an extension on your point. And it's like even like as an introvert, there's so much that you can learn from going to COP because you're constantly interacting with these different people from all over the world. I know that I had intimate conversations with individuals from Iraq, Australia, Brazil, Peru, Bolivia. I've had extensive conversations with people around the world. And because of this, I'm learning how to interact with people not only from another generation and different cultures, but also how they can take me seriously and accept my voice in the climate sphere. It also gives me a lot of knowledge, and it helps me with their personal stories and understanding their platforms for change, which aren't typically shown in the news. Mm-hmm. And with this knowledge, I'm able to bring this back to the community, which will be covered in our next question.
Yeah, I kind of want to build off of that as well. I think personally, and I think this is probably true for many people, and that the United States, we're kind of sheltered from what other countries think, especially those who are maybe just more on the developing side, or we can't really relate to those who live on small island nations because that's just not really much of, most
the news isn't available.
Yeah, most of the U.S. like just doesn't, relate to that. We just don't really have the news for that. So like being able to go there and listen to all these people. Like I met a farmer from Brussels, I met a farmer from South Africa, and I got to talk to them and just really hear their stories and their views on the whole situation, not only about how they live their daily lives, but also what they feel about the solutions that are being done, whether or not it's enough for what they feel is right. And I think that's just like, it's kind of like a culture shock, but it's in a good way where you kind of like realize a lot more about how, how you used to be, like we don't get the full story, but when we do get a much bigger story, like how important that is and how we can take that and grow from it and just learn more like how we interact with people even in the US or throughout the world.
Right. To kind of add on to this note of community, you were talking about how individuals interacting. I believe the challenge before us gives people everywhere a unique opportunity to advocate on everyone's behalf. It's truly a collective effort. So throughout this week, I've really discovered a new optimism for solving this climate change issue. You know, the IPCC report just dropped, and it was very a pessimistic outlook, I believe, on a lot of adults' behalf. But honestly, I just think it means new opportunity. You know, in the case of this climate change issue, if we simply believe that climate change is inevitable and unstoppable, and we're never going to actually truly work to reorganize or transform the administration that we need to fix this issue, you know. And I just think that I being able to interact and share ideas with everyone at this conference has really enlightened me, in the sense of that there's just so many opportunities and so much technology, so much stuff is out there that people are doing, making it their jobs to initiate this change.
And like, it's not even technology only. Like, I spent most of the week speaking with Indigenous people because of my background in northern Minnesota and my background in Spanish. So I really did want to interact with these Indigenous communities in Peru and Brazil and Bolivia. And they're coming up with completely different approaches where they're just solving mitigation and adaptation on their own.
Yeah.
So I think that creative solutions from around the world is another huge thing that we can take away from COP, because it's like, technology isn't always the answer. Some of the most immediate and the most obvious answers aren't the clearest ones. Sometimes if we just utilize a sense of creativity and we communicate with these different cultures, we're able to explore new pathways, and we're able to bring these along to our communities.
Yeah, kind of going along with that is just like, you know, we have all this interactions and learning. Like, I never knew that you could use such, because yeah, like going to like, you know, technology, like we think of it as always being like the iPhone or these new, you know, irrigation systems, but really like these like older societies have all this like different technology that really did work with the earth already. And like really just like interacting with these people, especially when the IPCC report came out, you kind of got a crash course on how to deal with situations like this in a formal and professional setting, which is something you don't really get a lot when you're in high school or even sometimes in college. So it's just kind of really interesting to kind of learn that. So maybe we can like take it with us when we go and start doing careers or we do professional interviews. I think that was something kind of like an unexpected thing that we took from COP, because we definitely really professional while we're here. We may be 17 or 18 years old, but we had to act like we were, you know, like everyone else. We were in, you know, suits and like very like formal, but even within that, we still were able to like connect on a very personal level, which is something you don't think about when you know, think about professional or, you know, this kind of setting. But yeah, I think that personal connections that we made with Indigenous or with business people, I think was really important, even at that kind of setting that we weren't used to.
Yeah, right. You know, I think that segues perfectly into our next question. How do we take this back to our community?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to begin this off by saying that our school is a very liberal community. I think that you can assume that by going to an environmental school, they're going to have a clear view on we should save the environment. And I feel like even within our community, our very liberal communities, there's the same general belief.
We're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, we're preaching to the choir,
so.
and it's not difficult to change these people's opinions. But we need to bring this to the larger sphere. We need to bring this to the people that don't believe in it, because these are the ones that we need to actually make a change with. If we start by only going to the easiest solutions and we start by going to our schools, it's not going to change anything because they already have that belief. We already know how it impacts us. We need to go to the people that actually will make a difference in this climate movement, because we're completely changing their perspectives. And I think that a big part of this is bringing it to our cities. I know that MN350, a group that I do volunteer with, does a ton of canvases, which can either be going step to step, or it could be like going on buses and promoting better public transportation. I think that we need to bring it to everyone, and we can't only bring it to the people that are immediate to us, but we need all of this information to be accessible so people can learn more about the climate and be more compassionate towards these environmental issues.
Yeah, so a great example of that, speaking to your first part about bringing it to people who may or not really agree with this or not know much about it. I focus a lot on agriculture, so I was talking to a lot of local farmers from, like I said, Brussels, South Africa, Kenya, England, and some South America as well. But I met someone from South Africa named Theo, and he did actually say that the agriculture industry is very hard to change their mind. They do not, if it already works, they're not going to change it, and it's very hard to convince them otherwise. So I think that's one part I can do, like to help apply to my community, is that I do know a lot of people who do work in the farming industry at a local and industrial level. So kind of like talking to them and seeing what solutions do they know about, or what solutions are they already doing that maybe they can expand upon to those that they know within the industry. Along with that, it's just I think that's also a good example of us as youth kind of not only going out into our community afterwards, but showing that. Sorry, that's my train of thought.
Right. No, but I
yeah.
think you guys were speaking to this notion of rallying together as a community and everything, but you can even put it in a more like localized perspective of, you know, in addition to being natural innovators, you know, young people are also consumers.
Yeah.
And they're putting pressure on businesses to act more responsibly, you know, because we have that influence. And we're also voters as well. And with the power of making politicians pay attention.
Yeah.
Like perfect examples are Minnesota Can't Wait, which is a youth coalition, and the Juliana versus the United States, which is the 21 students putting the United States on trial in that huge lawsuit. You know? As much as those are super cool examples, you know, just making even daily decisions of just, you know, I'm going to buy from this company because they're most sustainable versus some other other large corporation, you know.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, because we already know that corporations don't have a heart. They're in it for the profit. And if they see that the young people and the major consumers are shifting towards these environmentally friendly and sustainable options, these corporations will change their ways to fit and mold to the people that are buying their products. That's why there's such a sudden rise in popularity with sustainable products. I know that personally, as somebody who's interested in fashion, there's so many up and coming brands such as Reformation, which makes everything completely sustainable. Everything's transparent. They list their water usage and their energy usage
and where
for
they
every
source
single
it.
product. Yeah, they list their entire sourcing. There's another brand called Veja, which is a Brazilian brand that has everything ethically handmade in Brazil, handmade, sourced from Brazil. It lists the entire, it is completely transparent, because this is what the consumers want. So as long as we keep purchasing this, companies will keep catering to our demands.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of a more personal or more localized example of that is Target and Walmart. As a kid, I would never see anything organic, or like I knew nothing about where anything came from. And as I like kind of like, especially like everyone I know is more aware, and they always look at the labels and they're like, you know, where did this come from? And that's such a simple question to ask, but a lot of corporations are now having to like face that question, and consumers aren't liking the answer, so they're going to have to change. And you kind of see that with Target. They recently refaced a lot of their stores. And if you look at like how they're doing things, it's a lot more sustainable, and they can answer that question in a way that, you know, satisfies our generation.
Right.
Because that's what they're looking for.
Oh, for sure. And you know, how to get this message out there, how to communicate our thoughts and our ideas is just storytelling. It's simply just talking with your friends, talking with your family about what adverse effects that you're seeing with climate change, and making it, and not making it a political issue or anything, not trying to start an argument, but just simply talking with people, I think, and being able to get on some like a same like level playing field with people.
Yeah, I feel like on a similar notion, like where you're just storytelling and communicating with people, something that is very youth-centric is social media.
Right.
Like kids and teens can definitely be posting stuff on social media.
So accessible.
And I do see it a lot. I know that there's at least 3 people that make a weekly post about how to be more sustainable.
Right here.
Maybe that's just the people that I follow, but as long as this message available to people, like they follow you, they'll have to read it.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we're going to talk about reading things, we do have a blog for us during COP. It's called sescop24.blogspot.com. Just a little plug.
In the description below. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, no.
Our teachers did not tell us to do that, I swear.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like really like an overarching thing of what both of you just kind of said is like the very fact that we're here and the fact that we were able to get to this level of just the ability to like go to this thing and even just make a difference to the fact that we are here and like going back into our community and telling our story, the fact that yeah, we're 17 or 18, but we were able to strive for what we wanted to go, and we were able to reach this high level that people honestly think that it's not possible. We're capable. So yeah, we're kind of showing in our community that regardless of where you're from, especially for someone like me from a rural area, like it doesn't matter. You can do what you want. You can, like, if you're passionate about something, you can get there and you can make a difference. And I think that's something a lot of people don't think they can do. Like people, when you ask them about why aren't you sustainable, why don't you, like, how do you think you can be more sustainable? They always kind of be like, well, I think like I can't do it. Like I just don't live in a good area that's really sustainable or it doesn't recycle as much. It's like, that doesn't matter.
That
if you want
you
to
have
do
an
it,
individual
you
choice.
can do it.
right?
Yeah, and honestly, like just thinking about this, like we have seen a lot of ideas and interactions within the last week, but specifically we've seen a major lack of youth ideas and interactions because of the accessibility of the event. Well, you can make these changes on a local level. One of the key components of COP for Youth is accessibility, which I found that there was a major lack of.
Right.
And honestly, just to start us off on our final note of accessibility, I think that a major issue is that we can't get a lot of youth to COP. There's so little teen representation. I mean, I believe there were 3 high schools that were there, 2 individual groups that were with a church or some other group, and then a few individual youth activists. But considering how many people are at that event,
The negotiators, like all the side event people, that the
observers, the press,
right.
the industry,
right?
That is such a minimal amount. Like there's hardly anyone here, and they constantly talk about how much they want to hear our voice in the movement, but they don't have any representation from the global south that isn't in a wealthy area, and they hardly have any representation from any even youth in the global north. Like, I know some fantastic environmental advocates in Minnesota, some that are even working on a Minnesota Supreme Court case. I'm not going to name names or anything, but I mean, she's a member of Climate Generation, but there isn't enough delegates, there isn't enough space for youth to speak in this platform. And I think that that's something that they need to address. That's something that they completely need to increase because there's hardly any youth there, and they deserve to have a presence considering how affected they are.
Right. And I think one of also the problems with getting youth to COP, the accessibility, is how do you define youth? Because we went to these panels and it would be like a youth NGO, and we would go and see these talkers and see these speakers, and they would be 35. And as much as like we want to hear these 35-year-olds talk, we were just under another conception that like 16-year-olds or whatever, like youth spans from 16 to 35.
Or honestly, there were even middle schoolers there, and they were considered as youth.
Right.
So when you're looking at it, it's like 0 to 35, which is almost like comparing 35 to 70. Like just imagine how many experiences you've had in your life in that span.
Perspectives and
like
inputs.
Yeah, there's so many different people, so many different experiences, so many different histories that we've had. And to classify that all under one
umbrella, it's just
so
hard, right?
Yeah, it's kind of strange how they define that. But I do think like this is like we learned a lot at COP, like just to say that out loud. But we thought this was like such an issue that we kind of just noticed while we were there. But one of the reasons why, at least I think that this is the reason why there's such an age gap and why there isn't as many youth, is that there's this misconception that especially us as high schoolers or even just like freshmen in college, like we just like either we don't want to, or we don't have like the physical ability to understand and be at this level, at this this intellectual capacity to be part of this, to understand what's going on, and to honestly like have passion for this. Like, and this has been like there's been examples of this in all around the world in terms of activism or situations where youth have tried to have a voice, and everyone just no, you don't know what you're talking about. You're too young. You don't understand. Someone's trying to make you say this, or we're ignorant. Yeah, you like they assume we're ignorant. Like they assume ignorance instead of intelligence, and it's very hard to prove that, especially as someone who is a minor. You hear the word minor, like, oh, you don't know anything. You have no power. Stigma. There's such a stigma around it, and I think that's why there's such just like this gap and this like almost like a wall between like youth and getting to this place in terms of just like becoming leaders, becoming passionate about this, starting our careers and something like this. Is like this wall we have to overcome that is literally defined by age, which very few things should be defined by age, because that doesn't show, you can be a great leader, but you could be 15. Yeah. You could be, an inventor at 14, but no one will, look at your inventions because of your age. I think that's just something that's not, I think a cultural change needs to happen, but that's a massive issue, and I really hope that kind of comes up in later IPCC reports or even just like discussions.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because it's like they want to raise all these world leaders, but how are we going to create these great world leaders if we don't give them the platform and the experience and the knowledge and the opportunities to actually create these individuals? It's like they want this voice, but they're prohibiting it from actually coming out.
Yes. So, I mean,
it's hypocritical.
Yeah. So that's kind of our thoughts on how we experience COP. And so now we're going to open up to questions. You can use the mic, or you can use the chat box if you want to give a long question, maybe, or you just like to talk. And we'll try to answer what we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Right.
This is Karen Holwig. I'm out in Colorado, and I want to thank you all for pushing us to think beyond 2040 and 2050.
Thank you.
Even though we won't be there. But your points about the involvement of youth and youth leadership are really important. I also appreciate your emphasis on optimism and storytelling and sense of community. And what we've heard from the press is that yesterday the Trump delegation presented their vision of the future with fossil fuels. And there was a demonstration. Were any of you there? And what do you think about those kinds of tactics and their effectiveness or lack of effectiveness?
No, okay. So we were not there.
Right.
We actually only attended the last week, and the other half of our group is attending this week.
Right.
But I did hear about that. I saw the exact plan and all the information that was sent out for that action as a member of MN350. It was emailed to me so I could participate in it. And honestly, I do think that it is a good action for them to do. I think that by forcing them to listen, I think that at least pushes them to think about our voices and to think about our perspectives. Well, it doesn't force them to make policy, it at least forces them to consider us.
Right.
Yeah. Like there's nothing that we can do without actually having youth delegates that are serving and making policy. They can't be sharing their voices, but by forcing them to listen to it, they can at least consider us.
The next.
Oh, no. You know what? I'm going to be frankly honest with you. I don't necessarily if I know I can to speak to what you guys are saying, because I actually haven't read it. But
I haven't read it.
Right. But just to hear what I have been, just to hear a few snippets of what happened. It's a push in the right direction, I think.
Yep.
Truly. That's about as much as I can say on that. But
yeah, I mean, we were, I think, some news came out while we were at dinner on Saturday about the U.S. and it kind of was kind of ironic that we like left the day before and nothing was going on, and then on Saturday when no one's there, none of our delegates are there, like, you know, everyone just started talking. Like, yeah, everything kind of blew up.
Right.
Countries that have been kind of like very like slow moving on their feet, like the U.S. was kind of like, they're all kind of like, now we're going to be pushing, but everyone's like, hold on a minute, we know you guys have issues, so let's work this out before everything else gets worse. So as much as we kind of get like frustrated with how slow things are going, the fact that the U.S. is still like having some form of part, I think that kind of like shows that there is still passion within the population of the U.S., that there's enough that Congress is still willing to like put a foot in there until they gotta go back in.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions typed or?
Yeah. Is there any other questions that people have? I know if Craig, also, if folks are interested in hearing from the teacher perspective on bringing young people too, there might be people who are interested in that as well.
Yeah.
To put Mr. Johnson on the spot.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
he's right here.
So this is Frank Niepold at NOAA. I was a U.S. delegate in COP21 for the Paris Agreement, and with some of my colleagues on the line. And so it's awesome to hear from you guys. I love your perspective. That was a really cool discussion you guys had. And I heard a lot of things that are really important for me to hear. But one of the things I'm wondering from a kind of just a sense of it is, when we were at COP21, there were about 45,000 people there, and you could feel hope. For the first time, you really felt hope that humanity was actually going to deal with this problem, finally. What's the sense of COP24? What's the emotional feeling? What's the, with all these countries mixing together, what's the either vibe or sense or feeling or mood of the people when you were there?
Yeah. Thanks for your question. I think COP24. Sure. I heard a lot of people saying like it's almost as important as COP21 because this is where they write the rule book. So you can kind of feel that energy of like, it's an energy. I think it's very different from COP21 based on your description, because
right.
like we have this idea now, and it's a great idea as far as like everyone seems to agree with it. So everyone just like, there's this energy of almost like nervousness, excitement, and terror. Like, some people are just utterly terrified because they don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I think that's just like the general like census. Like, obviously it changes depending on who you're talking to. Some like the non-governmental organizations are super concerned about finances and they're really pessimistic about everything. But then you have some other people who are really energetic and excited. Like, yeah, we're getting places. Like, we're going to start actually doing something now. So that's been like kind of my general experience.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I kind of had a different experience based off of the events that I was going to. I primarily went to events that were led by Indigenous people and Indigenous groups. And those individuals have not heard their voice for a long time. They haven't had their perspective for like in the rule book for a long time. And it doesn't appear as though it's going to be integrated into the Paris rule book. So in that sense, it was very negative because they're just angry. They want their voices heard, but they keep being neglected. So those were kind of angry, honestly, in my opinion. And then if I look on the other side, a lot of the youth activists were like, we need stuff to happen now. So they were determined, yet also angry. I feel like a lot of people are angry because if this doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen. So people are very determined, and that's at least from my perspective.
Yeah. But do you have anything, Stan?
Yeah, the atmosphere at COP was definitely strong, whether on both partisans. You have people that are very willing and very passionate about like, we're going to make a change, we're going to do it now, this is what we're going to implement. And then you have people on the broad other spectrum, like, nothing's going to happen. We've had all of these COPs and nothing's going to happen. And but however, through the last couple of side events that I went to, especially speaking to this note about solidarity and how this climate issue is one that starts within. And I'm personally just seeing, even talking with these individuals, like our youth, like our future, I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, I will clarify that they're energized and angry, but not in a pessimistic way. They still just want stuff to happen.
They're frustrated.
They're frustrated
that
and
was
want their
definitely
voices to
energy
be
that-
heard.
Yeah, that's
But yeah.
the energy I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify because I did not hear a lot of pessimism throughout it. It was just frustration.
I heard the Kyoto agreement a lot. That's when they were pessimistic.
Kyoto?
Kyoto. Sorry. Sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, the Kyoto agreement, because that was, in a lot of people's eyes, that was a complete utter failure.
Yeah.
So whenever someone mentioned that, the whole room would just be like,
Oh.
and then it'd be like, great. So that was the only time it got really pessimistic.
Yeah, thank you so much for your
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
No, it's great feedback. Thank you.
There was a question on the chat box about our careers.
Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, I can read
Right.
out if whoever did it is okay
Yeah,
with that.
I'll read it. It says, thanks for your great overview of your experience. I'm interested in hearing about what potential jobs or career paths you are all interested in pursuing in the future.
Perfect timing, just getting off to college as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
Actually, she got her brown emissions notice as we were about to start this.
Oh, yeah.
So,
No.
there it is. Oh, no, never mind. That's something else. But yeah, it popped up in the screen.
Yeah, no, the second we started this, like, literally she was showing the slideshow, and it said, Brown admissions decision on the corner because MacBooks say on all your emails in the corner. And I was like, wow, I can't look at that. Can't look at it for a good hour, so that's great.
So what's your major? What's your career?
What I really want to do is I really want to go into international relations. They have a very strong program in that. So that would be an awesome opportunity, and I'd probably want to work somewhere in foreign services or NGOs, specifically environmental or human rights based.
For me, so far, honestly, I'm only 18. So we'll
That's
see.
okay.
I don't know, right?
You're 17.
17, excuse me, a month from now. But, right now, law, I really want to go into law, political science, in that whole field. But I also, just kind of coming after COP, corporate sustainability seems so fascinating to me. Just being able to put my 2 cents into big corporations and whatever, that was definitely a possible career path as well.
So I'm kind of an oddball in this group. That I kind of find out. I want to be a zoologist. Like, that's kind of the path I'm going towards. So very much like environmentalism, kind of like out in the field work. Like, I'm going to be kind of like the person you'll find out in the middle of the jungle or the woods.
Jane Goodall.
Yeah, I'm going to be like a Jane Goodall kind of person. And as much like I'm an introvert, I feel like, going to COPs and any form of large conference that has to do with the environment or climate is going to be part of my job, which is another reason why I kind of came here. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm headed for.
Yeah,
so much
question. Great question.
If this is Karen Holweg again, if you were given the power to make a recommendation to COP25 or future COPs about the involvement of youth, I'm sure you understand the expense of getting 30,000 youth at the conference. But if you were to think about using all sorts of technological sort of resources and other lower cost things, what would you recommend as a way to really involve youth internationally and give them an opportunity to, as you've said, really have access to the decision making and to plug into the whole process?
Ooh, were you going to go with that? Just to speaking to recommend, especially for negotiators, I guess my first piece of advice is
I'm on a conference call.
is just to be able to come to negotiations or to listen to people as mutuals, as individuals, rather than as polarized. You know, like even though or as lesser in somehow, because we are essentially all people. And I guess that would be my first like recommendation or advice that I would have to negotiators. But to play in this with like this piece of technology that you're speaking to, and trying to incorporate more youth, I think definitely like just this meeting is a perfect example of using those type of resources, and it's definitely feasible, and very low cost. There was probably like 100 computers at this conference, just being able to right, just to type in and everything.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk very similar to the note of negotiators. So there we go. But during one of my last panels, I was at one about youth. And in this, I heard one person suggest that there be a youth panel for COP. There's so many panels in the process. There are so many panels. They have Indigenous panels. They have certain panels for certain COPs. They have panels for certain decisions. And just to incorporate a youth panel would be a fantastic opportunity to hear the youth perspective, because then they would actually have a say in decisions. I feel like that is a better thing to say, because I was going to suggest possibly sponsoring certain youth, but that of course would be expensive. I just do think that we need to get more youth there at least.
I mean, yeah. I think my piece of advice would be more of an outreach. I think negotiators, just like in general, not just even youth, but especially youth and especially youth, that they kind of representing countries. So kind of going out to the countries, from like the most rural areas you can find to the people who really don't know what's going on, all the way to the people who are just like, you know, right there with them. They're going to COP or, you know, all the time. Just kind of asking like, you know, what's your perspective, and you know, what do you want from us? What do you want from our COP? And I think getting that perspective from just their country and then kind of bringing that to COP as part of the negotiations, I think that would bring a more like global perspective, because right now you hear a lot more from industries, from politics, and from like major culture before you hear from them. In terms of technology, I think like webinars and recordings, I think are really helpful for outreach in terms of education. So I think that'd be something important. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
No.
Yes. So coming from starting doing climate education 20 years ago, so I was a much younger person, and I worked a lot for younger people to have empowerment in education. But I would get from activists and people all the time, why are you bothering with younger people? We don't have time. We have to solve this in 1 or 2 years. We have to focus on adults. One is, I would say, use that when people tell you that you're not important, because that same argument was made 20 years ago, and the people who are now 40 know those people who were told don't bother with them, if you know what I mean, or 38 or 37. Okay. My question would be, and this is coming from an earlier COP, the one in Denmark, where wonderful things happened of younger people getting together. We had international networks and things, but it was organized by Denmark, and they did a great job, but it sort of fell apart after COP. There was no link, there was no sustainable for all the things that happened. Do you have things going on to make sure that all this wonderful work you're doing, the connections, is going to be around a year or 2 or 3 years from now or more?
Do we have like a connection network that we're planning on maintaining with these people from COP?
Sure, a way of sustaining the wonderful work you did past, say, a month from now.
Right.
Yeah. I think that with social media and the rise of social media, it's actually very easy to maintain these relationships. Personally, I got a ton of business cards, and I just transferred those onto LinkedIn so I can maintain those contacts.
I think that's what I also did to piggyback on that.
Yeah.
Also, but in order to kind of establish like a platform, I just think that central line of communication can spur anything. So just being able to like get these people's cards and get these people's information and contact info can definitely spur more ideas. You know, I was even talking with this lawyer and everything, and he offered me an internship and stuff like that. It definitely just establishing something.
Yeah, I think like just for any kind of stuff like that is just to keep the conversations going. Like climate change doesn't stop when COP stops, obviously.
Yeah.
Like the conversations for climate solutions definitely should be going on year round, especially with education. Like it shouldn't just be a unit. Like you would talk about in December and then, that's
And
it.
then okay.
Yeah, it's like okay, on to US presidents or something.
Right.
Just I really think like getting people to like continue that conversation in pretty much everything they do, and and doing that with the people you met from COP or people you
Or
made a connection with. Yeah. So I think that's an important part of that, and I think that's definitely something that all of us will try to be doing, especially when we go into college and we have a whole another platform to work on.
Yeah, like personally, there was a really interesting Indigenous group that I connected with, and I followed them on Facebook, and I've been like chatting them a little bit about what they do, and I hope to maintain that connection because that's something that I'm very interested in. But yeah, I'm not so sure if I answered that adequately.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I might add too, just from a different like umbrella level, Jim, that the work that this school has done in terms of elevating the presence of young people at these negotiations, and maybe Craig, you can jump in. I think that it's been noticed. And it's interesting too, just with the lack of federal involvement from the US, I think that the contingency of Americans at COPs the last 2 years I've observed also has given an opportunity for the folks that are really doing the work are connecting more than maybe before when at a federal level it was being coordinated in some fashion. I don't know, Craig, if you might want to comment on that or.
Yeah, I think for us, I'm gonna try there, Mike.
I'm gonna turn off my audio. Oh, okay.
I think for us the biggest thing, from an education point of view is we're trying to help these kids find their voice in authentic ways, and to take as much of the school out of the middle and get them engaged in the real world in ways that where they can find their path. Definitely for us, over the years we've seen that. This is the 9th COP that SES students have taken part in, and it's been pretty gratifying over the course of the time we've been coming. Not just our young people, but I have noticed a marked difference in more women involved, more young people involved. This just anecdotally, just me kind of looking at the people that are there, and so I, as an educator, I find that pretty gratifying, and frankly makes me pretty optimistic because as you heard tonight or this afternoon. These folks have fresh eyes on this issue, and they don't necessarily come with the baggage of either pessimism or there's not a way to do this. They see opportunity. They see almost excitement in addressing this, and so our over the years our goal has been to give them an opportunity to engage the world and to make these connections, and then feel the accountability of what will I do with this? I don't look to a teacher, I don't look to a school, I don't look to my parents. What will I do with this? And that's where we try to get them.
Awesome.
Craig, this is Frank. I just want to thank you for all the work you guys have been doing over the years. I think I love this question where we're trying to move from federal to national. Where it's more like everything that's going on in the country is represented in this work, as opposed to just from the federal to federal or federal to national. I think that's a really important flattening of the work we do in this space, which is what we've been doing on the education side more and more. So I think that's a really important perspective, and I hope we can continue it going forward.
Awesome. Well, I want to be conscious of time and say thank you so much to you guys. I know it's late over there too. And have a great end of your week in Poland.
Thank
you.
Thanks for having us.
And everyone, like they mentioned, I posted in the chat their blogspot.com. It's also in the Climate Generation Daily Digest, which you can subscribe to too at climategen.org/COP24. So thank you guys. Have a great week.
So much. Take care.
Thank you. That was awesome.